and the policy allows us to do that. So at least now the recording will be started, and I'll hand over to Kinwale Jude. Over to you, Mr. Jude. Please take us through what we have for today.
Okay, good morning, everyone. My name is Akinwale Jude, and I'll be taking you on implementing DevOps using GitHub Actions. Let me. So kindly let me know when you can see my screen.
Yeah, your screen is clear. I can see from here.
Okay. Okay. So for this training, we'll be going through these topics broadly. So as part of DevOps, you would have like continuous integration, continuous delivery, and specifically, I'm going to be showing these by building and deploying container images. And we would also touch on GitHub packages. Okay, so can you still hear me? Hello, can you still hear me?
Yeah, loud and clear.
Okay. So as I was saying, the topics we'll be covering are continuous integration, continuous delivery, working with container images, and also. So I can't hear you.
We should do it in the evening since it's 3 days, 5 days. Right? I don't really know why it's not editing. I want to edit so that.
Okay, hello, Theodore, can you mute your mic?
It's after concentrate.
After what?
Your class, and I think after school.
Okay.
Concentrate.
All right. Thank you. Sorry for.
No problem. So we'll start with continuous integration. Continuous integration is a software engineering practice that requires frequent commits to a shared repository. Continuous integration helps teams collaborate better and improve their overall software. And what you will learn as part of that is how to use GitHub Actions for continuous integration, how to create a workflow file that runs tests, produces test reports, and we'll be using a small Node.js server to test, to demo this. And for this, I'm going to be taking continuous integration and continuous delivery together. I'm going to be taking them together. So after this, we'll have a demo of that. So for continuous delivery, what this means is that the changes that are made in the code are automatically deployed or released to a testing or production environment as soon as they are merged. We would also be implementing this using GitHub Actions, and we would create a workflow to basically show how this can be done. And for that, we're going to be using container images as well. So if you want to follow along with what I'm doing, there are files in the chat. There should be a file called DevOps demo in the chat. You could download that, and as long as you have a GitHub account and either a Docker Hub account or like an Azure subscription where you can create a container registry. as long as you have either of those with a GitHub account, you should follow along. Okay. And then the third topic here would be building and deploying container images. A container image is a lightweight standalone executable package of software that includes everything needed to run an application. That includes the code, the runtime, system tools, system libraries, settings, and all the other things you might need. So you would also learn about like the basic components needed to build and push a container image to a registry. And we will create an action that builds container images from our source code and pushes it to an online repository. So for the continuous integration, continuous delivery, and building and deploying container images, I'll be using the same demo for it, but we'll go through the demo in that order. So if you have gotten the demo files I put in the chat, you could extract them into your code editor of choice, and you should see something similar to what I am seeing over here. Hello, is anyone following along?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay, so in the demo, you would have these files. You would have a coverage file, sample workflows file, and your .gitignore Docker file, your jest config, your package.json, and your server tests. So this application it's a very simple node server that it only has one route, and that route simply returns hello world. We are going to be using this to test it, and we are testing it using Jest. What we are testing for is to confirm that the response we are getting from that route is hello world. So the idea is if I were to change this to say hello Jude, the test should fail, and that would show up as part of our CI/CD implementation using GitHub Actions. So let me go through all the files we have here before we start. So let's start from this sample workflows folder. Let's start from there. So in this folder, I created like a bunch of sample workflows that you could use as a guide if you wanted to implement all the things we are doing right now on your own. You would also be using this as a guide during this demo. So you have one here for building your Docker image and pushing it to an Azure Container Registry if you have that. Then we have another for building your Docker image and pushing it to Docker Hub. We also have a third one for using the GitHub Container Registry. Instead of Docker Hub or Azure Container Registry, you could also use GitHub Container Registry. Then we have this for testing and building your applications. But this is currently built for Node right now. You could always make the change to make it work for whatever stack you are using. And this is like an example workflow of how you would deploy an application to Azure Web App if you had to do that. Yeah, so that's all we have in the workflows files. We'll still visit that when we are creating the workflows themselves. Then you have our Docker file. This is what we are going to be using to build the Docker images, and it's a simple Docker file here. We are using Node since the application we are currently deploying. We are using for demo is a Node.js application. We are using Node. We are using the Alpine version, and we are basically just copying our code over here into the container. Yeah. And this is our config for jest, for testing, our package JSON, and all that. And then we have our server, which is a very simple server with just one endpoint, which is like the root endpoint, and it returns hello world. Then we have our test here, which confirms that what we are getting from our server is hello world. Does everyone understand? So I can continue.
So far, so good.
Okay. So there are two ways we could create a workflow file for our application. So first off, I assume after you've gotten the demo files from the chat, you've extracted it. You initialize the Git repo in that folder. So that would be something like that would be git init to initialize a GitHub repo in that folder. And you also go online to create your repository online. Okay. So, but for this demo, I have already created a GitHub repo online. I will share the links to that as well in the chat when we are done. And in this repo, I have linked my code locally to this repository online. Okay. So there are two ways we could add a workflow. There are two ways we could implement GitHub Actions in our source code. I mean, you could go on GitHub after creating repository and pushing the code online. You could go to the Actions tab here, and the Actions tab. If you created a new repository, you won't see all these here. It will be most likely you have nothing here. But if you push the code I put in there, there's already a workflow that would run. So you would get at least one workflow run showing up here. So if you want to add a new workflow, you could click on this new workflow button. And this would suggest a workflow for you based on the content of your repository, what you have in there. So this is one method. You could select one. So let's say this, you could select this, click on configure. And then make any changes you need to. If you need to make any changes here, you could do that. And it will create the workflow file for you in a folder, which is .github, in a workflows folder, in a .github folder. But you could also create these folders on your own and add your own workflow there instead of doing this. So let me cancel this. If you go to our repository, we already have that folder, and I already created the sample workflow. So just for testing here. And what this workflow does is, this basically does your CI/CD. It gets the code, it tests it, and then it deploys it to whatever repository, whatever registry you want to use. Either this pushes it to both Docker Hub and Azure Container Registry. So this is where we want to get to at the end. This is where we are going to at the end. And for this, we have this empty workflow file, which we are going to start building up now. Okay. So on your end, you could create the .github folder, and in there create a workflows folder and create a file called workflow.yml. So as a very quick background, our workflows are written in YAML. It's like a markup language. It's similar. It's usually used for like configurations and things of that nature. So that's what we are using for our workflows. And for our workflows, there are a few things you need. So first, we could give it a name. So that's a name. Here we can describe what we want the workflow to do. We could say it's okay. Let's say this is test and build Node.js application. So that is a good name. And then we could then specify when we want the workflow to run. So for that, we use the on keyword on. And most commonly, you want your workflow to run after you push your code like to the online repository, or like when you push your code to GitHub, or when you make a pull request. So we could add this on push, and we could also have on pull request. Now, if we were to leave it like this, so I assume we have some knowledge of GitHub before I continue. So that I can understand like branches, like pushing our code online, stuff like that. Hello?
With you.
Okay. So I assume you have some understanding of like working with GitHub, like pushing our code, pushing our changes, making pull requests, merging branches, and those other related things. So with this on keyword, this is saying that whenever we push, if we leave it like this means whenever we push to any branch on our GitHub repository, the workflow is run. If we leave the pull requests like this, it also means the same thing. Anytime you make a pull request into any branch, the workflow is going to run. But if we had like a specific branch that was for production, let's say, or like a specific testing branch or like a production branch, we could specify that here. So we could say the workflow should only run when we are pushing and only to the main branch. So we could say we don't want to do that, and we could say the same thing so for the pull request. And we could also assume we have another branch as a CI. I'll still create that. So also say we have another branch CI. So if it is main or CI, if we make a push to either the main branch or the CI branch, or if we make a pull request into the main or CI branch, this workflow should run. Yeah, I can specify those are branches. Branches. Okay. And then we can then specify the task we want to run as part of the workflow. So we said you push to the main branch, this should run. And we specify what we want the workflow to do using the job keyword. So job, and then we could give the job a name. So usually it's build, or if you could change something else, but usually it's build. And now in here, you can then so we can specify the steps that we want to go through in this build as part of this build. Yeah, part of this build job. So steps. So for the steps, we could give each step a name. So we know we are working with Node.js. So one of the first things we need to do is we need to install the packages. Yeah, we need to first check out the branch and set up Node. Then install your dependencies and test and build artifacts if you have any. Yeah. So we have our steps, which is checkout. So, yeah. Okay. So for this build job, you have to specify the steps we want the job to go through. So first off, we are checking out the code. And then we set up Node.js. And these uses, these are basically telling our workflow that it is using these other workflows. So these are actually references to other workflows. So there is a checkout workflow by GitHub themselves, another setup node workflow by GitHub. So instead of us writing all the code that's in these workflows, we could simply use them and pass in whatever else we need to pass in. So for example, for setting up node, we are using the setup node workflow that was already created by GitHub, but we are passing in the node version and we are specifying that it should cache.
You have a class. Go to your class. Go to your class. Go to your class. This period of the class. Go to your class.
So there's one more thing. When you are specifying your build job, you also have to specify the environment it runs on. So for this build, we are specifying that it runs on Ubuntu, like the latest version of Ubuntu available. So our steps, we check out the code, we set up Node.js, we install our dependencies, and we run our tests. Now, this, if you notice, this other ones, the install dependencies and run tests, these use the run keyword. So the idea is this is going to be running whatever commands we pass in here on the platform that the build job is running on, which here in this case is Ubuntu, the latest version of Ubuntu. So these are like your normal terminal commands. So like this is like stuff you type normally yourself if you're using like if you're connected to the server. So you could actually write your own workflow to do something very specific as long as you have the terminal commands you need for that. But we'll still get to that later. So we install dependencies, we run tests if present. Okay. So that is enough for now. So this should be us implementing CI, and the main thing here is basically testing our code to check for any errors, to check if our tests are passing. So before I push this, I will check. I want to make our test fail, so I would go to the server.js and the response here, change this from hello world to hello lotus. I save that. And when I push this to GitHub, our workflow will run. Okay. For this, let me comment out the sample workflow so this doesn't run at all. Okay. Okay, so there was an issue with the previous repository I was using. I'd made some changes and switched the remote repository. So there were some issues there. So I've switched over to using a new repository. And I've pushed the code over there now. So let's refresh. So our code shows up here. And I go to the Actions tab. So it already says I have actions here. So let's see why this failed. Oh, yeah. That's a typo. So these are jobs, steps, branches. Okay. That's 125. Okay, so now we fixed the errors with our workflow file. It's running now. So I could I could click on the workflow, click on this build, and I can basically see it's going through all the steps that we had in the workflow. So where it sets up the job. Yeah. So yeah, it sets up the job. This is it basically starting up all the things it needs and getting the other workflows it is depending on here, which is like the checkout and setup node workflows. And then it starts the build job. And it does it checks out the code, it sets up node, with the version we specified to 16, version 16, and then it tells us there's no cache found, but I think when we run it multiple times, there will be a cache, so it would use the cache instead and take even less time. And yeah, it installs the dependencies for our application, and then it starts running the tests. And here it fails because it is expecting the response from the one endpoint on the server to be hello world. Yeah. But instead, yeah, so it says here, server should respond with hello world on the root path. Yeah. So instead, it received hello Lotus, and so it throws that error. So to fix this and to let the test pass, instead we could make a change to our code here on GitHub. So we could select the server.js and edit that. So change this to wow, and then commit those changes. But this time we would create a new branch for that instead. So we could call this branch CI. Yeah, so change hello world to hello Lotus. And then I propose those changes. And I create a pull request. So when I make the pull request, the action runs once again. It says that I've made a pull request and the action runs. So if it fails, I would have to fix the error before I can continue with the pull request. So let's wait for that to complete. Okay, so they pass now. So I can then come back here and continue with my pull request. So I can close the pull request now since the checks have passed. Merge pull request, confirm merge. So part of the use of this is you're collaborating with someone else and like they make changes to the code. When they try to make a pull request, it's also go through their code and like test it, make sure that it passes the tests before they are allowed to even make the pull request. And then you're then allowed to merge if there are no problems. So you have that. Okay. And so from this, so that's like an example of how you'd implement CI on that. And there is also this, there are situations where, for example, if this was a front-end application, for example, where you needed to like get like a build of the code itself, you could also add that. So you have this. So this npm run build, this is going to like build an artifact of your project if like a build command is present when you're like after setting up your project. If you specify a build command, mine doesn't have one, so I could leave this in here. It won't run since you have this if present flag here, so it won't run since I don't have any build. I don't have any scripts for builds, no any build commands or anything. So let me then go on to like to showing what the build artifacts would be. So you could also, like, ignoring the like situation where you need to build your code, you could also decide that you want to get like a snapshot of your code at a particular point during the workflow, while the workflow is being run. Let's say you could say after running the tests, you want to get a snapshot of your code at that point. You could use the GitHub artifacts. So there's so GitHub, they have a specific workflow to upload build artifacts. So for that, you would use this workflow, that's actions, upload artifacts version 3. And what you pass into that workflow is you specify the name you want your artifact. You specify the name of your artifact and you specify a path. So if I were to save this now and try to push, I should get an error that's the changes I don't have locally, but let me try. Okay, git push origin. So when I've pushed this now, our action should be running now. So go back to the actions. Okay, git add dot git commit. Okay, so after pushing our changes, we should have the workflow running now. Okay. So this starts running. We see our build job. We click on that, and that shows up all the details. It's currently installing dependencies. Yeah. So if we were to check here now, we see the tests run, they pass, but for this build artifacts, it simply skips it. Since like we don't have any build command like build script for our application. And for this build application artifact here, this is then basically getting our files as at this point in the workflow and zipping it. So this could then be shared to other people who have interest in the project. So they want to, if you wanted to see like exactly what was going on at that point in time, you could then go through the files in there. So this takes some time to load. So while this is going on, I want to talk about something on GitHub which we are going to use very soon. There is so in our workflow files, sometimes we want to use like secret keys or like passcodes or other sensitive information that we want to pass into our workflow, but we don't want it to be in there because like someone else could come over here and go through your workflows. They could literally read through your workflows. So if you had sensitive information in there, that would be very unsafe. So you want somewhere where you could keep those information and then pass them into your workflow. So on GitHub we have secrets. So it's in your settings, under settings, scroll down to secrets and variables here. So the idea is you have some sensitive information and you can save it here and pass it into your actions or anywhere else you need to use it on GitHub. So there are some secrets I would need for the upcoming parts of this demo. So I would add them. So I would stop sharing my screen temporarily to add them now. Okay, so I'm done adding the secrets I need to. So we can check our actions. Okay, so our action, so our workflow is done running. And so you click on this, we see that it has completed in about 2 minutes, about 3 minutes. And if we were to scroll down now, we have this artifacts here. So this is the artifact that was created at that point in time. while running the workflow. So I could click on this to download it. So while that is downloading, let's go back to the code and once again show you this. So in the workflow, the part that creates the artifacts is this step here as part of the build job. Now with this, we can then decide. So in this example, we are going to be using Docker for our deployments. So Docker already has some actions. So whenever I say actions and workflows, I'm using them interchangeably. They already have some workflows that they've created that we could use. So you have these here for setting up Docker. So I could copy this over. So this simply sets up Docker on our server, which is running on Ubuntu with the latest version. And then you then decide if you are pushing. So we want to then build our container and push it to a container registry. So if you are using Docker Hub, Docker also has some specific workflows they've created for that. So you could log into your Docker Hub account and then use this workflow as well to push your container which you built. It basically helps you build it and push it to your Docker Hub repository. For Azure Container Registry, I couldn't find a workflow that was already created for that. So instead, if you know the commands, you need to implement the same thing, you could simply type it in here. So that's like what I did here. So like for this is like the command you would have written yourself to like log in on the container registry, to build it yourself, to tag it and to push it. So if you're using a completely different registry, for example, you could also like go through the documentation, see how you could build and push your container image onto their registry and implement that as well on your workflow. So let's add the steps for logging into Docker Hub and building and pushing our container image to Docker Hub. Okay, and so if you notice in this step, it is expecting a Docker Hub username and the Docker Hub token. Now, these are part of the things I added to my secrets when I stopped sharing my screen previously. And so referencing them like this with secrets dots and then the name of the secrets would basically get it from our Docker secrets and put it into our workflow when it is being run. So, and as for this other workflow here that builds and pushes it and pushes our container image to Docker Hub, what this needs is we need to specify the context. So this is where it's going to be looking for our Docker file. So our Docker file, and then we can specify a platform that it's supposed to use to run the content of our Docker file. Specify that we want to push, and then specify the name of the container and the tags that we want it to have when we are pushing. So a lot of this you actually get from your Docker Hub. So if you were to go to Docker Hub now and create an account, you would have an option to create a repository. And when you create a repository, you can specify a name, a description, and you basically have this. It shows you how it expects you to push an image to this repository. So using the CLI, for example, it shows how it expects the name to be. So it's expecting something of the form. Go back here. It's expecting something of this form where you have your username and then the name of the image itself, and then you tag. So the last push to this repository was about 2 hours ago. So I'm going to run the workflow now, and we should see one that is more recent.
So that's what we are doing. So I take my own percentage.
Yes. It's coding now. It's coding like always looking like this. And HTML. I actually just I don't let me go because
Business websites.
and Java.
Okay. And so I save our workflow now. I save this and I commit my changes. Then once we're done with that, if I refresh the actions, so we have our actions running once again. But now we have more steps than the previous ones. And after building the application artifact, it will also set up the dependencies for Docker, log into Docker Hub, build and push Docker Hub. Also, after this run, I will comment out the step for building application artifact, as this takes too much time. Let me do that now. So while this is running, let me ask, does anyone need like an explanation on like Docker file and like how that works? Okay, so while that's built in, I'll change my workflow instead. Instead of building and pushing to Docker Hub, I'll change it to instead build and push to an Azure Container Registry. And for that, I have the commands for logging into the container registry, like my username, the login server, and the password already provided in secrets. And then you also have here, you have the command to build your Docker file. Where here I'm specifying where the Docker file is. I'm specifying the tag myself. If you notice, I'm using this $sign image name here to refer to the image name, but we don't have that set up yet. So we could come back up here. The same depth as where you have jobs, you add env. Then you can then specify some items that, let's say you had, if you wanted to name something and you're using it in multiple places, you could specify it here instead. So you would have image name. That's what I called it. Image name. And I could call this CI underscore CD underscore demo. Yep. So while it is running these commands, wherever it sees this $sign image, it simply puts the value here, the CI/CD demo. It replaces the $sign image name with that. Okay, so it's still building. Okay. Well, all that is still loading. Let me go to the content of these sample workflows. So in here you have, there are 5 different workflows here. And in my instance, some of them are similar to content we have in this workflow here. So in this workflow, you basically have the different parts of other workflows that we need, and you simply copy them out and move them in here. So for example, we have this workflow. What this does is it builds and pushes the Docker image to the Azure Container Registry. And for this, it doesn't matter what stack you're working on or anything. It simply checks out the code and it does only the logic for building your container and pushing it to the repository. But this one is working with the Azure Container Registry, and it expects like some details like your registry login server, your registry username, and your registry password. Also, you'll specify an image name also. So you also have a similar thing too for this. So this is a workflow that only builds and pushes your source code to Docker Hub. So you have same bits of you have the same steps that you had in our main workflow file here, but it's only that the parts specific to Node.js or the stack we use to create the application are not really relevant here, as that is going to be handled while the Docker container itself is building. All these files are all in the DevOps demo file in the chat, so you could always download it and go through it later. So this workflow here, this is to build and push your Docker images to the GitHub container registry. So you also have like similar formats there where you specify like if you want the workflow to run on pushes on pull requests, the branches, specify like an image name, and you specify, and here, if you notice here, the jobs that they had, they didn't call theirs build, they called theirs push. Like the name of the job is, you could change it to whatever it is, feels more relevant for your use case. But you also have like similar things here where you check out, you build the image, you log into your registry. But since this is GitHub, it uses your GitHub token. You don't need to set this up as if you have a GitHub account, you already have a GitHub token. So it does most of the work for you here. But the end result is still you'd have the container image on their registry. So you could pull it from there, or you could link it to wherever it is you're handling your deployment. Now, as for this workflow will test and build your Node.js application. So I think the main difference here is you have this strategy matrix here where you could specify like the node version. So this is similar to the env you had in the previous ones, where you could reference something, where you could reference like a particular variable or a particular string, or a number or something similar. You could reference it multiple times. So you simply just set it there once, and now you have it here as a matrix.node version. So you could have other things as well in there. Yeah. Okay, so the previous workflow was taking too much time, so I cancelled it. I have commented out the build application artifact section, which seems to be what is taking a lot of time. So I've commented that out. And I've commented the steps for building and pushing to the Azure Container Registry. So we could still test this building and pushing to Docker Hub registry. So I'll push, I would commit my changes and push now. So my workflow is running. Okay, so this is a set of Docker for our environment. It has logged into Docker Hub and it is building and pushing our container image now. So we can see the logs as it's building the container image. Okay, so our workflow has completed and it was done successfully. There were no errors. And so that means as part of this, container image that have been built and pushed to our Docker Hub repository. So if you look at the logs of our workflow, the build job, so you see where it set up the requirements for Docker, and then where we logged into Docker Hub, and we built and pushed our image to Docker Hub. Here you just have the push job cleanup for all the actions that are currently, for all the previous steps in our workflow. Just to confirm that, if I were to go to my GitHub, to my Docker Hub repository now, I can see it's my Docker Hub registry. Now I can see that this CI/CD demo had a recent push, like a few seconds ago, and this is 2 minutes ago. So that was just done by that was recently done by the workflow, as part of the workflow. So whenever I make some changes now and I push, the container image that is on the repository gets updated as well. And if this is already linked to, let's say, like an Azure app service, for example, that also gets updated. And also in my workflow, I could specify like what tag. I could specify that I want the container to be built, but then to be tagged as testing or production or development, or you have all those other options as well. Yes, now I'm changing the repository we are using from Docker Hub now to Azure Container Registry. So these are the changes I made to the workflow file. So I've removed the previous code for the Docker Hub. So if I were to save this, if I were to commit this now and push, it should also build a container image, but this time instead push it to the Azure Container Registry. And when I go there, I should see that a push has been made very recently. Okay, so our workflow is done running. So if I were to go to my repository now and I were to refresh this, yeah, so I see the last modified is just 12:43, which is like less than a minute ago. So it has updated this, and so I have like the latest. I've built a more recent version of the application, and I've pushed that to this repository now. So if I needed to, I could always pull from the repository or from the Docker Hub. So are there any questions so far? Hello? Are there any questions so far?
So far, mm, not really. But I wanted to ask something around that. I think about the pull request. Like, what exactly is the? I mean, is there any shortfall to a pull request when um two people are working on it? Is it possible for two people to make a pull request at the same time? Is the platform made such a way that it cannot happen at the same time?
It's that it is possible, and like there are no problems if it does. There are no problems if it does. So it seems so when I'm going through the pull request process as one person, since I'm like the owner of the repository, it's a lot more, it's a lot quicker than it might have been. So what's in a more use case would have been you have like the supervisor and then you have like others who are contributing to the project. So someone else contributes to the project, they make a pull request, the supervisor is informed, then goes there and then like goes through the changes, sees if like the changes are okay, and then merges. So you could have like multiple requests waiting until supervisor goes there to like check them and then approve those pull requests before they go through. So what our actions does now is you that are trying to make a pull request before the pull request even goes through in the first place, before it is made, it first does the check. So if you if the changes you made basically breaks or doesn't pass a test, that already breaks. So you then have to then go back and then fix whatever parts of your code there is failing the test before you can then make your pull request. So after that is done is when the supervisor can then go there and then accept that pull request. So it doesn't matter. You could have like several people making pull requests like almost simultaneously. It doesn't really matter.
Very consoling. And the thing there is, it doesn't even go through if there is a problem.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Okay. It's good. Thank you.
Okay. So essentially, I've kind of I've gone through all these topics, but it isn't just one demo. But um if anyone else has any questions, but if not, you could always check the demo files, you have like the workflows there, and if you look at the workflows, their names are kind of like descriptions. They're basically telling you like what that step does. So you go through the workflow file, you see the steps. They kind of tell you exactly what the step that does. And some also have comments, like telling you what the whole workflow as a whole is doing. So as long as you understand like it is about how the workflows work, you're able to like get another workflow and then modify it to fit your needs. So like on GitHub, if you wanted to maybe deploy applications to a particular platform, you could check if there's a workflow for that. If there is, you take that and you modify it to fit your own requirements. Okay, and
Okay, I mean, basically, thank you. Thank you so much, Mr. Jude, for making this a very cool, straightforward, and engaging one. As much as we have some questions, we may not want to take everything right now because we are already out of time. So I would just the link to the Discord community is there on the chat, so you can just join the Discord community and get to ask your questions and get to know more. And for now, we'll be closing this webinar right now, and we'll just see you on the Discord community. Just make sure you join. And Mr. Jude, I think you also be there as one of the moderators too. So
yes,
would see everyone over there. All right. Thank you, everyone, once again, and do enjoy the rest of your day. Thank you very much.
okay, thank you.